Hello everyone. I'm going to be doing this case study with Vivanna Hernandez. My name is Edith Mejia, and we're going to talk about Reverend Rodriguez and ethics.
What are the facts of this case? So far, we know that Nancy was referred to Pastor Hector by Reverend Rodriguez, who felt that Nancy's depression is impacting not only the way she engages in the church activities, but also her husband's desire to become more involved with the church. He feels that if Pastor Hector is successful at addressing her depression, then he can be successful at preserving Nancy and her husband's marriage. However, during the session between Nancy and Pastor Hector, it was learned that Nancy's depression stems from the fact that she is a victim of domestic violence. Moreover, the domestic violence is occurring in front of her 4-year-old son, who also becomes scared when his father acts violently. As a result of the domestic violence, Nancy is experiencing suicidal ideations where she imagines driving herself off the bridge at least twice a day. Pastor Hector wants to assist Nancy and do what is right for her, but he fears how helping Nancy is going to impact his relationship with Reverend Rodriguez, who solely asks that he addresses her depression. Pastor Hector also feels that Reverend Rodriguez is going to feel ashamed at the fact, or embarrassed or upset at the fact that Nancy was able to open up to Pastor Hector about the domestic violence and not to Reverend Rodriguez. However, Nancy and Pastor Hector are both clear that her lack of openness to the church is out of her fear of how the church is going to respond, as she already has been told by other women members that she should try to work on her marriage and cope with what she's enduring, because the goal of a wife is to preserve her marriage by all means necessary.
So first we're going to talk about the ethical considerations. So we looked at some of the code of ethics. Things that we pointed out with code of ethics were the values were integrity, which according to this case is basically how Hector could not the fact that Hector could not dismiss what he had told Nancy, and to protect his relationship with Pastor Rodriguez. He is to act in a certain way or in a certain manner, responsible and honest, to obtain the needs of the client, which is Nancy. Also, commitment of the client. Social workers' primary responsibility is to promote the well-being of a client. In general, client's interest is the primary. Even in my field, we try to make sure we're servicing the client. The client is the main focal point. So despite the stakes that he's risking with Mr. Rodriguez's passing from Pastor Hector, whatever their relationship is, it shouldn't be considered in that. It shouldn't be a problem for him to come up to him and speak to him in a professional level, not as a friend level or a pastor level. He should not consider this decision to help Nancy. Nancy obviously shows and has demonstrated and spoken out about her depression, which we want to make sure that we're acting on behalf of the client, and also the child that she has, her 4-year-old child. We have to make sure we're thinking about that as well, with the fact that she's admitted of suicide attempts. So another code of ethics was privacy and confidentiality. Social workers should be able to discuss anything with their clients, but there's a difference with privacy and confidentiality, and there's some things that can break the confidentiality depending on suicidal or suicidal plan or like intent. And if you're gonna hurt someone or hurt yourself, that's things that we have to report. Hector, Nancy discussed with him about the message of her committing suicide and trying to drive off from the bridge from where she goes to work. So she does have a plan. She has thought about it. And it's something that it should have been reported because also you're putting the child in danger as well. Another code of ethics is the unethical conduct of a colleague. So social workers should take the adequate measures to discourage, prevent, expose, or correct the unethical conduct of their colleagues. So Pastor Rodriguez should be talking to Mr. Hector about the fact that of their relationship to make sure it's at a professional level when he's at work, and then also has a friend level just because Hector, the pastor, knows his children. Also, he should just encourage Pastor Rodriguez to try to mend the abusive relationship to keep the marriage together because Nancy's relationship is toxic and it's causing a danger to her and her child as well, which is it's a safety hazard and a child safety risk, which is also supposed to be reported as well. Another code of ethics that's put into play in this is commitment to employers. So again, making sure you're keeping the NASW code of ethics, complying with those ethics and obligations to make sure that there is no confliction like this to happen, especially in a church. Even though Hector has a MSW, he isn't licensed to be a social worker. If he's going to take up the role to be a counselor in a church, or a therapist in the church, he should be following those be a mandated reporter, be responsible of reporting anything that's important like that, because this could be a person that is suicidal. The fact that Hector is not reporting the suicidal thoughts, and not only suicidal thoughts but intent and plan to authorities or to the hospital or anything like that, it's putting the church liable to the fact that he's not reporting it at all. Of course, confidentiality is an ethical duty to fulfill the promise that the client's information is going to stay between them and it's not going to be disclosed without authorization. But it's to the point, it does not apply when it's disclosed that that is required to prevent a clear, like if it's like an immediate danger to the client. We cannot disclose that. This is an exemption. And we have to protect the client even though the client doesn't feel like it needs to be protected. Also, we're also looking at another perspective with the fact that the 4-year-old child is there. We don't want anything happening to that child because that child is being exposed to an abusive relationship and also a person that is suicidal as well.
There are various ethical theories that play a role in this case. For example, the benefits: to do what is right and good. People benefit most from good. Hector is to consider how his decision to protect Nancy is going to keep her alive and ensure the safety for her son. His responsibility to do right and good would be to get Nancy the appropriate services, i.e., to address her mental illness and safety as a result of the domestic violence. Another ethical theory that plays a role in this case is the respect for the autonomy. People should be able to make decisions that apply to their lives. Each individual deserves respect because only he or she had those exact life experiences. Given this theory, Nancy should not be pressured by the church or the pastor, Rev Rodriguez, to endure any more abuse. She should not be pressured to remain in her marriage because she took a vow to death do them part. Another ethical theory that can be utilized to make the appropriate decision in this case is the deontology. And according to this theory, Pastor Hector should adhere to his obligations and duty as a master social work pastor. What does this mean? He should act on the behalf of the client and not on his interests or how his actions is going to impact his relationship with Rev Rodriguez. Another ethical theory that can be utilized to support why Pastor Hector should do what's right for the client is the act utilitarianism. And according to this act, Hector's to benefit is to act in a way that benefit the most people regardless of his personal feelings or societal constraints. This ethical theory obligates Pastor Hector to act in the best interest of client Nancy and her 4-year-old son. The last ethical theory that Edith and I want to present is a virtue, which judges a person by their character. Nancy reporting that her husband threatened her after she informed him that she was going to meet Pastor Hector speaks to back Pastor Hector's decision to not allow Nancy to return to her home, because the likelihood of her being abused is very high given her husband's history, as reported by Nancy. Pastor Hector admires the work Pastor Rodriguez has done in his church, and he is conflicted with his moral value of wanting to do what is right for Nancy, despite how it would impact his relationship with Rev Rodriguez, and views of a pastor in church which feels marriage is sacred and it's a pastor and church duty to preserve marriage. Furthermore, Pastor Hector is familiar with the church thinking that God would frown on women who left her husband, the belief that it was part of a woman's job just to take it and keep the family going no matter what. Client Nancy has personal values of being a good wife and Christian, and for such reasons she's conflicted with keeping secret all that she is enduring and not messing up her family's reputation with the church. Nancy is also concerned with how revealing what she is experiencing at home in the hands of her husband can put others in danger if they try to help her. Pastor Hector admires the work Pastor Rodriguez has done in his church, and he is conflicted with his moral value of wanting to do what is right for Nancy, despite how it would impact his relationship with Rev Rodriguez, and views of a pastor in church which feels marriage is sacred and it's a pastor and church duty to preserve marriage. Furthermore, Pastor Hector is familiar with the church thinking that God would frown on women who left her husband, the belief that it was part of a woman's job just to take it and keep the family going no matter what. Client Nancy has personal values of being a good wife and Christian, and for such reasons she's conflicted with keeping secret all that she is enduring and not messing up her family's reputation with the church. Nancy is also concerned with how revealing what she is experiencing at home in the hands of her husband can put others in danger if they try to help her.
I believe this case can definitely, I can definitely relate to this case because Reverend Rodriguez was very conflicted because of the relationship that he had with the pastor Hector. But again, this goes by his integrity, and also this is conflicting with his work and his job, which is something that should be drawn like lines of boundaries between people's positions in the church, and to make sure that everybody knows that this is a professional setting, just because we're putting at risk the client's life. and also children's lives as well.
Who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are Nancy, because she is the one enduring the domestic violence and as a result suffering from suicidal ideations. Her 4-year-old son, because he is witnessing the domestic violence and this is having an effect on him emotionally and mentally. Another stakeholder is Pastor Hector, because he has to consider how helping Nancy is going to affect his relationship with Reverend Rodriguez and the work that he does with the children ministry and the youth. The children ministry and the youth are also at stake, because how Reverend Rodriguez responds to Pastor Hector is going to decide whether he will be able to continue to work with the ministry. Hector's job may also be at stake, because if indeed he is no longer allowed to work with the children ministry and the youth, we are not sure how his supervisor is going to respond to him. Nancy's relationship with the church is also at stake, because helping Nancy, right, it's going to inform the church that she decided to follow through with separating and reporting the domestic violence. And according to this professional literature review that I've encountered called The Complexity of Religious Response to Domestic Violence, it is known for churches to not address domestic violence and actually try to keep it in secrecy, right? Because of a psalm like Mark 10:9, that what God has joined together, let no one separate. So marriage is to be forever, and things like this should be worked through with the church and the couple, and authorities should not be involved, social services should not be involved, etc. According to Colson's in the domestic violence within the church, the Bible makes it clear that the church has no business closing its eyes to the violence. When the husband abuses his wife in any way, that she is all bruised, swollen, and even broken, violence is in no way a part of the spirit of the Christian love. Therefore, if Pastor Hector fears how Rev Rodriguez is going to respond to his decision to help protect Nancy and her son, he can bring it back to the duty of the church to protect the abuse victim. Why do we have to consider the well-being of Nancy's 4-year-old son? According to Holt, Buckley, and Whelan, preschoolers who witness violence have more behavior problems, social problems, post-traumatic stress systems, greater difficulty developing empathy, and poorer self-esteem than non-witnesses. Pastor Hector is to consider how remaining silent to protect the church and maintain his relationship with Reverend Rodriguez is going to further impact Nancy's 4-year-old son.
So I'm going to talk about other considerations, agency policies, legal considerations, consultations, mandated reporter. Basically, there was many things that needed to be inputted. Just like an agency has policies, churches should also have a policy about when it comes to their therapy sessions and referrals and clients. There should be a mandated reporter. Even though there is no licensed social worker working in the church, there is an MSW person or student or a person that graduated at MSW, and he or she knows about the code of ethics and something that should be put into practice, just because it can fall, a lot of things can go wrong. Social service workers are required to report when there is an official or professional rule. They are presented with a reasonable cause to suspect a child abuse or maltreatment where any person is before the mandated reporter or a mandated reporter is acting as an official or professional capacity. The fact that Hector took on the responsibility to be a therapist in the church, he should be a mandated reporter, and he's acting as the official professional therapist in the church. So there's a lot of liability going on and responsibility going back to him, because he's supposed to be the first one to report that, and it's something that it can take away his master's degree, or it can be a legal problem that can cause a case, a court case. It is a sign of child neglect, just because we're exposing the child to family violence. Not only that, is that the fact that Nancy has actually spoke about it and informed them about it. It hasn't been reported yet. And I think that Reverend Rodriguez should take the responsibility and speak to authorities or speak to Mr. Hector, and then immediately go to the officials and report this case.